Hi everyone, welcome back to Federal Government. Today's topic will cover the federal bureaucracy. So let's get started. What is bureaucracy? Well, simply put, bureaucracy is or encompasses the thousands of federal government agencies and institutions that implement and administer federal laws and programs. The bureaucracy is all of the departments, all of the agencies, and the people that work within those departments and agencies that administer the laws that Congress writes. So, where did bureaucracy come from? Bureaucracy has existed since we became a nation. In 1789, under the Articles of Confederation, we had three executive departments. These departments were Foreign Affairs, War, and Treasury. These three departments together were called the Cabinet. Even back then, Congress realized the importance of letting the President decide upon his own cabinet, with the approval of the Senate, of course. Why is this important? Well, the President needs to be surrounded by people in whom he has complete confidence and trust. So why does the bureaucracy grow? What causes the federal bureaucracy to keep growing? Basically, it was the growth of the United States population, and it continues to be so. We see rapid growth in the bureaucracy beginning in 1816. Article 1 allows Congress to create a post office. So, stop and think. Did we have one post office to serve a city, a state, a general geographic area? We ended up having one post office to serve each city, and as the cities grew, so did the number of post offices. As the country expanded westward, so did the number of cities. This caused an increase in the number of post offices needed. The post office was originally under the Department of the Treasury, but in 1829, President Andrew Jackson removed it from the jurisdiction of the Treasury and raised the Postmaster General, the person in charge of all the post offices, to a cabinet level position. Therefore, President Jackson created a whole new department. So, wars have also helped the bureaucracy grow. If you were to look back at our history, the first major war we fought as a country was not outside our borders, but inside. The Civil War led to the creation of two new bureaucratic positions. These were the Department of Agriculture and then the Pension Office. The Department of Agriculture was created due to food issues. Now, the North was trying to fight a war with the South and had numerous poor harvests and then distribution problems. Can you effectively do something if you have numerous individuals attempting to correct the problem, or do you need one individual or agency providing leadership? Think about that, and this is how the Department of Agriculture grew. Now, the second office created by Congress was the Pension Office. Now all of a sudden you have all of these Union veterans who fought for you and are now owed federal benefits. Who is going to oversee all of these claims? Bureaucracy, you have to understand, is not only limited to agencies, but can also be commissions. After the Civil War, there was a huge amount of growth by big business. This led to price fixing and other unfair business practices. In response to concerns the citizens were not being treated fairly, Congress created the Interstate Commerce Commission, the ICC, in 1887. This commission was an independent regulatory commission. This means it is an entity outside of a major executive department. Now, most independent regulatory commissions will focus on particular aspects of the economy. The creation of the ICC shifted the focus of bureaucracy from services to regulation. This allows the government to have vast powers over individual and property rights. Now, the modern bureaucracy. Who are bureaucrats? Well, bureaucrats are unelected people who work for the government in cabinet level departments and independent agencies. These create over 2,000 bureaus, divisions, branches, offices, services, and other subunits of the federal government. There are over 4 million people working for the federal government as bureaucrats. So the question now is, which do you think is the largest bureaucratic agency? Well, the post office is the largest government employer with over 1/4 of all government employees working for them. The only larger private industry employer in the United States is Walmart. Only about 10% of workers for the bureaucracy are found inside of Washington, D.C. Where are the rest of the bureaucratic workers? How can they be found in various states if they are working for the federal government? Well, stop and consider that bureaucratic workers can be found in many divisions, in many commissions, boards, agencies, and departments. And there are federal agencies and departments in every state, in every major city in the United States. So you will find that the majority of the federal workers, of the federal bureaucratic workers, are found spread across the United States. So we need to re-examine who we think of when we are discussing federal workers. Federal workers can be forest rangers, FBI agents, foreign service officers, computer programmers, security guards, librarians, lawyers, doctors, plumbers, etc. In fact, the federal workforce closely resembles that of the private workforce. However, there are problems with working for the federal government versus working for the private sector. If you work for a company in the private sector, you are going to make more money. This leads to a very high turnover rate in the federal government. Many people will get government jobs, stay for a year or two to get experience or make contacts, and then leave to go work for private companies. So why is this important to us as taxpayers? Now, there is some formal organization to the bureaucracy. Nobody is sure on the exact number of agencies, commissions, and departments which make up the federal bureaucracy. Therefore, they are divided into 4 general categories. These categories are cabinet departments, government corporations, independent executive agencies, and independent regulatory commissions. So first, we'll go over cabinet departments. There are 15 cabinet departments, and they have the responsibility of conducting broad areas of government operations. Cabinet heads are called secretaries, except for the head of the Department of Justice, who is the Attorney General. A secretary is responsible for establishing the department's general policy and overseeing its operations. Now, Congress has some control over the cabinets due to appropriations, which is the budget or monetary control, and also due to the fact they are trying to implement congressional wishes. Next, we'll talk about the independent executive agencies. Now, these resemble cabinet departments, but have a more narrow area of responsibility or expertise. These agencies usually perform services instead of regulatory functions. A couple of examples of these agencies would be NASA and the Environmental Protection Agency. Now, independent regulatory commissions. These are agencies created by Congress to exist outside the major departments and regulate a specific economic interest or activity. Some of these independent regulatory commissions are those such as the National Labor Relations Board, the Federal Reserve Board, the Federal Communications Commission, and the Securities and Exchange Commission. Finally, government corporations. Now, government corporations are the most recent additions to the federal bureaucracy. We started seeing them in the 1930s. These businesses these are businesses established by Congress to perform functions that private business could provide. These include the United States Postal Service, Amtrak, and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. So, what is the purpose of bureaucracies? What do they do? Well, first and foremost, they implement. This is simply the process by which a law or policy is put into operation, thereby executing congressional wishes. Now, iron triangles. In the past, when political scientists would attempt to determine how bureaucracy made policy, they would study iron triangles. Iron triangles are relatively ironclad relationships and patterns of interactions that occur among agencies, interest groups, and congressional committees or subcommittees. So what I have done is I have put a outside resource in Canvas that will explain further what iron triangles were and how they functioned. Basically, it is just the relationship between the three sides. Think of a triangle, right? There are three angles, so there are 3 points. This is the relationship between agencies, interest groups, and congressional committees. Now, issue networks. Issue networks are very similar to iron triangles, except now we have added people to the list of those that are involved. These will include agency officials, members of Congress, interest groups, but they also include lawyers, consultants, academics, public relations specialists, and sometimes even the courts. So when we are talking about bureaucracies, now we have expanded from what was essentially a three-way relationship in an iron triangle into what is now a network relationship. It takes more than one person to get bureaucracy going, to implement policy. So in order to implement a new law, you are required or you're going to need the help of multiple people, multiple agencies. And that's what these issue networks are. It is all those people that are going to be involved in implementing a policy. Now, interagency councils. Many agencies will work towards the same primary goal while serving various constituencies, meaning more than one agency, more than one department, more than one area. So to help guide all of these agencies, we have interagency councils. So these are groups created to facilitate the coordination of policy making and implementation across a number of governmental agencies. Now, policy coordinating committees. These are simply sub-cabinet level committees created to facilitate interactions between agencies and departments to handle complex policy problems. So basically, the interagency councils and the policy coordinating committees are these group of people that are there to help implement new policies, and they are there to coordinate. So we are talking about management, sub-cabinet level committees, and we are talking about committees and councils that work across more than one agency or department. Now, when legislators write laws, are the laws clear and concise, or can they be jumbled and misunderstood? Most of the time, laws are jumbled and need clarification. Legislators have a general idea of what the law is supposed to do, but have no idea how to implement it. That leads us to reviewing policy. And the first type of review is administrative review. Now, administrators study and interpret the law so they can write the rules and regulations to implement the law's enforcement. All laws undergo administrative review. Now, the next thing is administrative law. Now, administrative law, these are simply the rules and regulations written by administrators to administer a law. So do not get review, administrative review, and administrative law confused. Administrative law is what every new law undergoes. That means some bureaucrat somewhere is reviewing a new law and trying to figure out how to implement it. So this bureaucrat will write down rules and regulations that will concern the implementation. Administrative law is those rules and regulations that the bureaucrat came up with in order to implement it, to administer it. And the effectiveness of a law is determined by how administrative law is written. So if you have any questions, please let me know and I will try to find something that will better explain administrative review or administrative law. But please do not get those confused. Now, accountability. When it comes to accountability, the first thing we're going to talk about is executive control. The president does exercise some control over the bureaucracies because he appoints the bureaucracy head, meaning the cabinet members. However, the president does not watch them constantly and does not have the expertise to oversee and understand everything the agencies do. Congressional control. Now, when it comes to accountability, Congress can control agencies with the power of the purse and oversight. Congress controls funding, appropriations, for all governmental agencies. Now, without money, can an agency function? No, of course not. So that is one way Congress controls bureaucracy. Also, Congress can call committee heads to come testify in front of them so that Congress can question how the effectiveness of the committee or agency is working. Congress can call people to testify and make them review their entire agency. Lastly, there is some judicial control when it comes to accountability of the bureaucracy. While the judicial branch does not appear to have as much control over a bureaucracy as the other branches, like most appearances, this can be deceiving. Federal courts can issue injunctions or orders to executive agencies delaying the start of implementation of new laws. This will allow the courts time to decide if a policy the agency is attempting to implement is constitutional. Now, recognizing a bureaucracy. We've talked about how the bureaucracies are formed. We've talked about what they do. Now I want to discuss just quickly how you can recognize one. First and foremost, most bureaucracies are very large in nature. They have to be. There are many issues that a bureaucracy has to oversee that they need many people to specialize in certain areas. So there is no minimum or maximum size to a bureaucracy. Neutrality. Neutrality can mean two things. The first is how the law or regulation is administered. Is it administered fairly to everybody? Now, the second recognition of neutrality is how does the organization decide who it is going to employ? Do you have to know somebody or do a favor for somebody in order to get hired? The federal government actually tried to reform bureaucracy after 1829 when Andrew Jackson became president. So we went from a spoils system to a civil service merit system. So what exactly does a civil service or merit system mean? Well, in this type of system, potential employees are tested and This is then used as a measure to begin a hiring process. That's why there is a civil servant's entrance exam. If you can pass the test, then you will move forward to the next step of hiring. It is no longer who you know, but what you know. You actually have to be and have experience in the position you are applying for. Now, hierarchy. This is the formal authority and control exercised at successive levels from the top to the bottom. If you will stop and consider, the bureaucracy is a hierarchy. All of your top level officials are at the top, and then they have directors and regional managers and district managers and so forth and so on until you get to the very bottom, who are the low level working employees. So you have kind of a pyramid, right, with the very top person being the head of that department and moving down all the way down to the person that unlocks the door on the building every morning. Now, expertise in a bureaucracy, the people working for any department have to have an understanding of their job and how their decisions are going to affect others. So you have to have expertise in the subject or issue in which this department or any department is administering laws for. If you work at the Health and Human Services Department, you have to have an understanding of health and human services issues. If you work for the Environmental Protection Agency, then you should have experience in environmental issues. Of course, the question has always been posed of whether a lot of the bureaucracy should be privatized. The problem with the argument of privatization is that while it might alleviate the bureaucracy, it might make it a little more streamlined. Private companies have one motive, and that motive is profit. So they have a reason to want to make something more efficient. Except profit would actually work against privatization because while it would make it more efficient, companies would be liable to cut corners in order to increase their profit. And that's all I have for you guys today on the federal bureaucracy. As always, please let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I look forward to our next topic. So y'all be safe, and I will talk to you later.